Well, I would start with William Barr. William Barr is mentioned by the President of the United States by their own release of those notes, or reconstruction, if you will, of the phone call with Zelensky. And he mentions, talk to Giuliani, talk to the Attorney General to investigate the Bidens. And also, as we know, William Barr was front and center in this whole reconstruction of an alleged DNC Ukraine conspiracy that was at the heart, the president was saying, of how the Mueller probe began in the first place. Mm-hmm. That's part when he talks about CrowdStrike to Zelensky, he's talking about the origins of the Mueller investigation, as far as he's concerned, having already told the Attorney General to investigate that. Remember when the Attorney General was given the power to declassify key, top secrets from the intelligence community in that regard. So all that's part of that, their reconstructed notes from that conversation. So why was Barr and the Office of Legal Counsel at the Justice Department even involved in deciding whether this was an urgent Inspector General's report that should go forward to the committee as mandated, shall go forward within 7 days? He's got a lot to answer for. The Vice President, Mike Pence, did not go to the inaugural because, as part of this timeline, if you will, in the complaint, he was substituted for the Energy Secretary, Rick Perry, whom no one would say was part of any major conspiracy. The fact that Mike Pence was pulled back, taking back U.S. support and credibility for this new Ukrainian leader until he played ball. I mean, that's the theory of the case, at least, according to the whistleblower. So Mike Pence is involved. He had to know why he was not going to the inaugural as planned, as previously announced. Mike Pompeo was just asked at a closing news conference of his involvement in the UN General Assembly meetings. He was just asked, what did he know? He had not read the complaint. Really? And said that he couldn't really comment, but that the State Department's involvement in all of this was, beyond reproach. I'm paraphrasing. Well, somebody was involved in getting rid of the very highly regarded U.S. ambassador to Ukraine right in the middle of this timeline. The President of the United States has his first call with Zelensky. Then the President goes on Fox News days later and talks about this prosecutor, Lutsenko, has been meeting with Giuliani, and that it involves the Bidens, and it's a big deal. It's big. It's incredible, he says. Days later, this ambassador is recalled from Kiev, where she has been opposing Giuliani's meetings. Volker, the State Department official, is empowering Giuliani, setting up these meetings, making this all take place. Then, only days later, a week later, she loses her job. And she's been the career professional who has all along been objecting to these ex parte efforts by the State Department and Rudy Giuliani on the president's behalf, and according to the President of the United States, William Barr as well.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.